There are many ways to find calmness, but in the end, calmness is a choice, a conscious choice. Wouldn't it be nice to have three simple steps or stages to reach that conscious choice and maintain a center of calmness? Good evening or good morning, everyone, depending on your time zone, and welcome to another episode of the Center of Calmness. Today, we are super blessed to have Grace Harris with us. Welcome, Grace.
Thank you for having me. It's very, very exciting.
So I just wanted to start by asking, how are things with you over, as I understand it, you're calling in from Australia today?
Yes, things are very well. We've just turned into spring. It'll be summer in a few months. And we're quite blessed here when it comes to what's been going on pandemic-wise across the globe. In my area, there's not much of it. And so we're able to actually, to a certain degree, go out and socialize with some safety considerations. And so I'm just really grateful for that, but also very mindful of what everyone else is going through for the rest of the world. But yeah, all good in my family as well. Thank you for asking.
Sure. And it's so glad to hear such good news as well, that in your area, the pandemic hasn't had as great of an impact. And my heart still goes out, and I think our hearts still go out to areas that are hardest hit and where folks are locked down much more tightly to prevent the spread of the virus, hoping for a cure or a vaccine or some way to get around that very soon. So outside of that, how are things with you and with your business and with your coaching?
It's going beautifully well because right now I'm actually releasing the book that is the foundation for everything that I'm teaching, and it's called Become the Woman of Your Dreams. And this is really the book that's just going to spread out courage and vulnerability, especially to women, but more specifically to those who have gone through things like trauma, abandonment, and some form of abuse. And it's just sharing and being raw and being open about things that we may have neglected as part of our past, and therefore we have sort of come to a level of indifference towards. And then we're so unaware that these indifference that we have towards these negative experiences have turned into a belief system where we're just rolling with emotion and not living life consciously and intentionally. And therefore there's this certain cyclical pattern there that keeps repeating itself, intergenerationally and multidimensionally. And so I'm very, very excited for that, because I believe that this project is really going to elevate the awareness that I can spread out there.
That's great. And I just remember back to our earlier conversation before we came on the show, much earlier actually, where you mentioned that when we brought up the subject of calmness, it resonated with you and with your past and the journey that you've taken personally. I wonder if you might just touch on a few high points of that journey and how your own personal transformation took place.
Yes, would love to. So as a child, DK, I was abandoned at 5 years old. I was left to live in a house where I had my relatives there. But then I was over time, for a period of until I was 19 or 20 or 21, I stayed in that house, and the spectrum of, especially during my formative years, the spectrum of neglect, abuse in many different forms, and then and the whole abandonment thing that's really been my experience. And so that became an identity for me, that I accepted that this is the norm of the life. I became so detached from my full consciousness that I had a choice to change that. So I went through life using those belief systems, the disempowered belief systems, thinking that that's the norm. I've become indifferent to the pain and all the abuse. And so I've repeated those cycles. Now, what's happened is, when we spoke a lot earlier before, and I noticed that you've actually chosen a platform called Center of Calmness, is that for me to come to the place of being calm, I've had a few times really had to put myself in the eye of the storm to recognize that this is not the place of creation, it is the place of destruction. And so those eyes of the storms were, for example, going into toxic relationships, not once, but a couple of times, and just choosing endeavors like that really ate my soul instead of nourished my soul, like jobs that didn't align with my talents and my gifts, and choosing to react in like knee-jerk reactions, or even just sustaining anger because it was part of my defense mechanism, and so that anger would snowball to relationship destruction, and so on and so forth. So for me to really go into the intentionality of calm is where I would love to be, was for me to see myself in the eye of the storm so many different times. And then there was the one final one, which was a near death experience. And when that happened, and I was lucky enough that it wasn't my time to go, and I came back here, then I really woke up. You know, I thought, how have I lived my life so far? Why am I here? And what if I didn't make it? What would that have been like for my loved ones? And so I had that big chance to work towards the center of calmness.
That's really, yeah, that's a powerful story. And I just wanted to touch on a couple of points. First, that you mentioned the abandonment and abuse kind of forming a sphere of pain, if you will, and that's the storm that's swirling around, right? And I suppose that most folks with that much pain would choose the detachment that you're talking about, where rather than going to the center of the storm, you're actually trying to just escape it, but it's always catching up there behind you. What as you were wrestling with that, maybe you could take us through a key moment where to just so the audience can appreciate what that felt like and how you worked your way through it.
Yes, so I always like to use a little metaphor, just so it's a little bit easier to understand. Just because you go through a vicious cycle of this kind of storms, you've a lot of women, especially if you're educated or if you have a job, we have a level of imposter syndrome. Like, for example, I looked pretty successful on the outside back many years ago. Like, I had a few areas of my life which were, they look really good. I traveled the world with my kids. I had a really good financial career, and I could keep up with the Joneses, buy a house, do this, do that. But there was one fundamental area of my life where no matter what I did, it pulled me right down, and that is the relationship area. The relationships that I had with intimate relationships. To a certain degree, my mothering to my children were very controlling, very strict, and that all stemmed from the relationship that I have with myself. Because you can only carry a relationship towards other people to a certain level that you carried the relationship with yourself. You can love people as much as you love yourself. And if you don't have that much love for yourself, you ain't going to be able to give that much love to other people. So what's happened is, because I had that type of imposter syndrome, and I didn't recognize that that all this outside success didn't matter if the inward success was not present. I didn't recognize that. And so the universe was giving me some signs. And these signs can go in three forms. It's a feather, the brick, and the truck. So the feather would be like a little bit intuitive, a nudge in your thought that says, hey, that doesn't feel right. You need to look into that relationship. Perhaps talk to a really good friend, or open up to someone that you trust. And if you ignore that, which I did, because I was like, I can't trust anybody, so I'll just trust myself, because that's what I've always done ever since I was abandoned, and there's no one else to rely on but myself. So I ignored the feather, and then the brick in the face hit me, which could be, an illness. It could be, I don't know, you get fired from your job, a falling out with a friend, falling out with a family member, and I still ignored those things. In my case, it was, I had a broken shoulder. I had like all sorts of illness here and there. And so I ignored them because I was still very self-controlled. I wouldn't let go. And then finally the truck which was the near death experience. And I would not recommend that, because the danger of going to the extreme of the truck is that you may not survive it. You may not come back. Lucky for me, I did. And so I'm
Right.
here to tell you, yes, yes. So I'm here to tell you that um, you've got to listen to, you've got to be vulnerable enough and courageous enough to accept that, hey, I don't feel good, and perhaps there is more here than meets the eye. And asking for help, number one, is I was cursed with so much independence, and a lot of us that's gone through abuse and sort of transcended that to a certain level, we feel that we're in control, so we're independent. But that's actually quite superficial. You've got to transcend that superficial independence and know that if something doesn't feel right or feel good, you've got to address that. It's the deeper level of self-awareness. And so I've become very passionate about detaching my real self from the pain and all the self-doubts, and just have the ability to examine that for itself, like actually touch it like an object. Like if this is the belief, I'll go, ooh, what does it look like? What does it feel like? Is it heavy? Is it dense? Does it actually lift me up? Where is it coming from? What were the experiences that were associated with that led me to believe that? And so how can I change that to make me feel better? And what's it going to look like? Just really, it sounds almost technical, but it all comes from it's like a core power, like coming from your heart, the ability to listen deep within.
That's very interesting. So, if I understand correctly, just pulling a couple of key points from that, first is to have an open heart, to really be authentic and honest about how you're really feeling at first, correct? And then after that, you're speaking of the beliefs as if they're objects, and thinking of them almost from the outside, right? Rather than being within the belief, but removing oneself and saying, well, what is this belief? Could you perhaps give an example of a belief that you examined this way, and perhaps maybe one you kept and then one that you threw away once you examined it and realized that it wasn't serving you?
Yeah, would love to. We'll start with one that I have to throw away. So I separated from my husband when my children were very young. They were like 1 and 4 years old, and for some reason after that separation, I left him. I had this belief system that I will not be able to successfully raise these little children without a partner. I just had that thought. I was kind of attached to it and convinced by it. And so the first man that came along, I well, I had a relationship with him just because I thought, oh, bang, problem solved. I've got a man, and now it's complete. Then I can move forward with what looks like a complete family, a complete blended family. So then I can, go ahead and look after my career, go ahead and make sure that the house is all well furnished and designed and whatnot. And so it was a belief system that was really detrimental to my life, because this man was even more toxic than the one that I've just left. And I didn't even I had the red flags, DK, mind you. Like when I first met him, I remember a thought that was really, it was like a red flag that said, you have to be very careful. I don't think this is a trustworthy person. But the belief system of I need a man to be able to raise the children was stronger. And so I actually had a relationship with that person for 4.5 years. And so it was finally when I got out of that, and that's a really big saga on its own as well. But now I can look at that belief system, and I have the ability to go to see it like, wow, how disempowering was it? Like, what was the evidence that I had that I could not raise the children without a man? I absolutely had no evidence for that belief system to be true, because A, I had a great job. B, I had so many friends that would have been willing to help me. And C, there are so many evidences all over the world that women raise their children by themselves healthily. And so if I was aware enough at the time to examine, hang on, let me just rethink this thought, because I don't have any evidence that this is true. And if I actually believe that thought, what is the potential damage that I can do to myself and my life if I attach myself to that thought. So just have a play with what would be the opposite of the thought. So if I had the ability to play with the opposite of the thought, which is like, I am empowered, I have everything that I need to raise these children on my own, better than, with anyone who's not worthy. If you played with the two polarizing belief system, how empowered would you be? You would have the choice, wouldn't you? So that was that belief system. And the other one, the belief system that I've always kept, and it's not so much more. See, it's interesting you ask this question, because this belief system, I can tell you, does not really reside here. It was one that I've always had in my heart and in my gut. And this is something that I've had ever since I was a child. I remember when I would escape the house where I lived, I would go to the open fields and play by myself in nature. And I would just like run in the open fields and windmill my body, and the breeze just blowing through my hair. And I'd feel this an infinite feeling of hope. And I didn't even know what I was excited and hopeful for, but it was because I was with nature and that was what I loved. Obviously, I couldn't verbalize that in my head at the time, but that feeling, I've always had it. It's a sense of hope, even though I wasn't aware of what I was being hopeful about. And then I remember I was pregnant with my first child, and every morning when I woke up, I felt so excited about tomorrow when I didn't even know what I was going to do today. So it's just that ingrained, intuitive self-belief. And when you have that, I really encourage women to not just hold on to it, because that's what I did. I held on to it. But if I was aware enough, I would have cultivated it. So I encourage you, if you have that and you feel you're holding on to it, man, you've got to cultivate that. You've got to look into it, feel it, and make it grow.
That is super powerful. You've uncovered so many elements there, and that feeling of hope, that belief that you kept, and that experience that, like you said, was in your heart and in your gut, which I think are the most powerful anchoring beliefs. That in my mind, that's where they're actually held, is in your heart and in your gut, rather than in your cerebral, cerebral cortex, if you will. But really, what you're speaking of, in my mind, is the center of calmness. So it was so great that you found that at that time, and were able to leverage that going forward with being full of hope like that. And I think this would be a great segue then to talk about the 3 stages of conscious living that you mentioned as part of your core coaching system. I'd be excited to hear an overview of those 3, if you wouldn't mind.
Yes. So it started with when I had a near death. This is how I got to discover this process. Is because when I had a near death experience, I began to become very aware of the thoughts that were going through my head and why I was thinking them, and how come that I consider myself to be highly intelligent, but my life is in shambles. And so I thought, there's got to be something that's not working here, because even though I've led myself to believe that I'm so smart, it's just everything is in shambles. So I really examined that. And so I learned to separate my thoughts from my awareness. And so I teach women now to just be mindful that just because you're thinking something doesn't mean you have to hold on to it. You can actually let go of it. Most of the time I ask women to just close your eyes and think of an object. Say you can think of I don't know, a tsunami coming at you. And if you hold on to that thought on the front of your mind, between your eyebrows, where you can see with your third eye, hold the tsunami for 1 and 2, and then consciously, intentionally let the tsunami go. It's just like a thought. You can hold on to the thought, examine the thought, and if you don't like it, not mine, sorry, I'll replace it. And so to be very tangible, what I've done in terms of to help myself to become very aware is I've developed a system called Life Inventory. And so what I did was that I listed the people, the places, and the experiences that were currently in my life. And I did like an Excel spreadsheet, like, are they actually serving me and making me elevate, or are they regressing my life? And I would write down a person or a place or an experience. I would tick either column. And so then just by ticking them, I don't even have to make a decision for now. I'm just being aware. Okay, so because this is what the person gives to me, it's like regression or progression. They belong in I hope you still got me. I've just blacked out on my own screen, but yes, so awesome. So then just that self-awareness, just knowing. And then the next phase, you can spend as long as you want in the self awareness. Don't give yourself pressure. Be patient with yourself. It's all about coming back to what your body and your mind and your soul is aligning for. And I don't know, I spent, let's say, so the near death experience was 2013. And then so I spent probably about a good 2 3 years just becoming very self-aware and just honoring myself, because I got busy with taking away the people that didn't serve me, taking away the places and the experiences. And once I've done the weeding out, which is still part of self-awareness, is that I've now become obsessed with self-mastery. And this is where you're really honing into your daily practice, your daily rituals. And how I teach that is through mindful transformative journaling, and it's involving gratitude practice on a daily basis. It's involving breath work practice on a daily basis. People call this prayer, meditation, stillness, call it what you like. It really is just giving the space to be you. I mean, so many cultures, so many traditions, we are all one and the same. We don't have to label anything as is. And so it's really just coming back to center and just really having that breath work for yourself. And the third part of being self master is the intention and the visualization. So knowing what you really love. So, for example, for myself, I've been in the finance industry for 10, 12 years at the time, which is a long time. And while it served material things in my life, it was eating my soul, as I've mentioned before. And it's so totally not related to what I'm really passionate about. So I had to transition out of that in a very loving way, in a very caring way, in a very mindful and responsible way. And that's part of self mastery, is to ensure that you're not trying to run over your children or your loved ones, or your responsibilities to follow your dreams. So this is a process. And so those two fundamental levels is really going to set you up to find your legacy. And your legacy, you don't even have to look for it. It will just fall into your lap as long as you're working with your self-awareness and self-mastery.
That's very profound. I just wanted to ask one question as we move toward closing the segment here. How do you apply the visualization for that third piece of or that third stage of conscious living as far as moving toward the legacy aspect?
Beautiful question. I love that question. There are so many ways that you can practice visualization, but the one key to visualization is that there is no one set vision. Just because you visualize something doesn't mean that's it. So your visualization is ever consistent, constant changing. You have to live it. You have to be able to touch it, smell it, draw it, and see it, and feel it. So you can use a vision board if you are very visionary, and that vision board can be in, you have to see it every day. But like I said, if there's something in the vision board that you want to add, you want to remove, feel free to do so, because it's a relationship that you have with your future self. You and your future self, you're bridging the gap. So if that's what you can see today as your future self, and tomorrow your future self has grown long hair, or I don't know, if all of a sudden has got a microphone on her hand, then change the vision a little bit. But how I personally do it, I just mentioned the vision board because it's very, very common. How I personally do it is I use a journal. So I have tons and tons and tons of journal, and I actually draw me and write me. So I talk to me. So I go, I am grateful for myself doing this in 5 years' time. I am grateful for the X amount of women that are learning this X particular skill from me. And so I'm very, so I go from here, from the mind down into my heart, and then I feel it. So it's a daily practice. And it's when I teach the journaling, the visualization part has to be there, because your relationship with your future self needs to be daily, so she or he can come to you now. So if you're a beach person, I'm a beach person, so I can use this example. Imagine yourself walking on the beach, and there's a stretch of the beach, and you're walking and you're feeling really beautiful, you're feeling good, the breeze is coming to you and you can hear the sounds of the waves, which for me is the sound of my soul. Imagine yourself walking towards you at the same time from the opposite direction. So you can, so that's not, you're not just standing there and going, you're not just going to wait for her to come to you. She comes to you as you go to her. So it's a mutual job. So as you visualize her, she will also do her best to come to you as quickly as she will be able to. Depends on how much you allow the transition, because sometimes we have blocks. That's why we work every day, is to remove those blocks. Sorry, that's a Australian grammar for you, but yeah. So
Nothing wrong with that at all. Them blocks is very understood.
yeah, so it's a daily practice is the one key. And if you're visual, go for it. If you're someone who likes to write it out. And if you don't have any of those material resources, speak it out. It's all about the energy. Speak the energy out to reality, whether that's to a friend or to the air, works just as good.
Yeah, energy. Yeah, energy is formless and boundless, right? That is an extremely. I can just, although I've never experienced that exercise the way you've mentioned it, I can feel that it's extremely powerful, and I'm very glad that you shared it with us today. As we close here, I did want to include some information for the audience, so they might reach out to you, and I really hope they do, because you obviously have a lot to teach. So I've got the link here for your book, which is mybook.to/Be the Woman of Your Dreams, all one word and no final slash. So again, that's mybook.to/Be the Woman of Your Dreams. And that'll get you to Grace's book. And Grace, I really appreciate all the time you spent with us today, and everything that you've shared has been extremely profound.
Thank you so much for having me, DK. I hope you have a beautiful evening in Houston. And yeah, it's been such a pleasure.
Thanks again for joining us. And for the Center of Calmness, I'm DK Warner.